Welcome to The Great Detectives of Old Time Radio from Boise, Idaho. This is your host, Adam Graham. If you have a comment, email it to me. Box13 at greatdetectives.net. Follow us on Twitter, Radio Detectives, and become one of our friends on Facebook, facebook.com/Radio Detectives. Today's episode is brought to you by the financial support of our listeners. You can support the show at support.greatdetectives.net. All right. Now it's time for today's episode of yours truly, Johnny Dollar, The Cronin Matter, Part 1 and Part 2.
From Hollywood, it's time now for...
Johnny Dollar.
Joe Parker, Johnny, Surety Mutual.
Oh, hi, Joe. What's on your mind?
A gorgeous doll named Dolly McLean. Remember?
Sure. The Champagne Dream Girl.
Yeah.
Dancing darling of the roaring 20s. Finally married Barnaby Cronin, didn't she?
Right. And for a wedding present, he bought her the Circle of Fire.
Oh, yeah.
One of the 5 most beautiful necklaces in the world. Diamonds and emeralds. Worth $500,000. It's been lying in a bank vault for the last 10 years since Barnaby died. We carry the insurance.
So?
She's coming out of seclusion, Johnny, giving a party. Just like the old days, she says. May go on for a week. Her last fling. And she's going to wear the Circle of Fire.
Uh-oh.
Get the picture? Gallons of champagne, everything mixed up, crazy. And that old lady with $500,000 around her neck. Target.
You've got a problem, Joe.
Johnny, we've got a problem.
Tonight and every weekday night, Bob Bailey in the transcribed adventures of the man with the action-packed expense account, America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Expense account submitted by Special Investigator Johnny Dollar to the Home Office, Surety Mutual and Trust Company, Hartford, Connecticut. The following is an accounting of my expenditures during investigation of the Cronin matter. Item 1, $14.80. Transportation to New York and to the apartment of America's one-time dream girl. One time, a long time ago.
How do you do?
I'm Johnny Dollar. I believe Mrs. Cronin is expecting me.
I'm Mrs. Cronin, and yes, I am expecting you. Won't you come in?
Oh, thanks.
I did have butlers and maids and such for years, scads of them. But since Barnaby passed away, I've just hibernated, you might say. Oh, in here, Mr. Dollar.
Thank you.
10 years now in this same little apartment. As you can see, I've just been living like a little mouse.
It looks very comfortable.
Oh, I suppose it's comfortable enough, but... Oh, Sylvia, I'd forgotten you were still here.
Mm-hmm. But not for long, Mrs. Cronin.
Oh, no, please stay. We'll have some tea or sherry or something as soon as... Oh, you two, do you know each other?
No, I'm afraid we don't.
Oh, but of course not. How could you? Sylvia, this is Mr. Dollar. Miss Blake.
How do you do, Miss Blake?
Hello.
Mr. Dollar's here to talk to me about, something or other. I'm not quite sure what, as a matter of fact.
It won't take but a few minutes. If Miss Blake would excuse us.
Sure. Go ahead. Have at it.
Well, if you'll come this way, Mr. Dollar. Don't you leave now, Sylvia.
Not a chance. I just spotted your bottle of tea. I'll have one or two with soda, if you don't mind.
What's Oh, I see what you mean. You young people. In here,
Mr. Dollar. You by any chance Johnny Dollar?
Yeah, that's right. Why, Miss Blake?
Just wondered. Well, here's looking at you. And, brother, I wouldn't be in your shoes for $1 million.
No? How about $500,000?
That, I'll admit, might interest me.
Well, shall we?
After you, Mrs. Cronin.
Thank you. Wonderful girl, a born comedian.
Yeah, she's a scream. What is she, an actress?
Oh, no, no, she writes things for magazines and things like that. Sit down, Mr. Dollar. She came to interview me one time. That's how I met her.
I see.
She wrote a piece about my necklace, the Circle of Fire.
Sylvia Blake. Oh, sure. Articles about gems, famous stones, jewel robberies.
That's her. Oh, she's fascinated by the subject. She's coming to my party.
Oh.
Why don't you come to my party, Mr. Dollar?
Fine, I'd love to. In fact, that's why I'm here.
Oh?
Joe Parker over at Surety Mutual is kind of worried about this party, Mrs. Cronin. He's afraid you might invite people like me.
What?
I mean, people you don't know.
You're a detective.
In a way.
I told Joseph how I felt about that. He's not going to send any detectives around snooping into things, spying on my guests, wearing the hats in the house.
Huh?
Oh, not that you're like that, of course, but it's the principle of the thing.
Well, wouldn't you have a better time at your party if you knew you were safe?
Mr. Dollar, it was at a party that Barnaby gave me the Circle of Fire. Our wedding reception. There were over 2,000 guests, 1,000 of them invited. And we danced. Oh, we danced all night. And the necklace was beautiful. And I was beautiful. Back then.
True, but...
And then afterward, at 4 o'clock in the morning, we drove through the park in a hansom. Just the two of us. And the driver, of course. And I wore the circle. And I was safe, Mr. Dollar. I was perfectly safe.
Maybe you were just lucky that night.
Barnaby was so wonderful. And he could make living so wonderful.
Well, I don't doubt it. He was probably a man who could manage things pretty skillfully.
He was running 2 railroads and a bank, all at the same time.
Then I imagine he had no trouble arranging for your safety without even letting you know about it.
You mean guards all around?
It's possible.
Yes, it is. He was like that. He never wanted anything to worry me. All right, Mr. Dollar. You win.
Good.
But it's only because of one reason. I like you, and I want you at my party.
Thank you, Mrs. Cronin.
Oh, you're going to love every minute of it. It's up in the Adirondacks. Our old summer place. Joseph told you, I suppose.
Yes, he did.
Mrs. Cronin.
And the people I've invited, hundreds, literally. People I knew in the old days. Of course, a lot of them won't come, but, it was strange. So many of the letters came back undelivered.
Mrs. Cronin.
Oh, Sylvia, I didn't hear you. Come in.
I'm the sneaky type. You've got a visitor. Says he's an old friend.
Really? Well, I suppose I'd better see you. You'll excuse me, Mr. Dollar.
Sure, go ahead.
You and Sylvia talk to each other.
I brung the bottle in case you're interested.
Short on the soda.
Right. She's on a cloud by herself. Of course, some of the invites to the party were undelivered. Those beautiful people had a habit of dying young. Say when.
When? Who's the visitor?
I'll guess with you. Looks like an overgrown leprechaun. Said his name was Shorty Weber.
Shorty Weber.
You know him?
I know of him. An old-time song and dance band, among other things.
She probably worked in a show with him back in those dear dead days. Anyway, he's got an invite clutched in his sweaty little palm. Another freeloader, I suppose.
Aren't we all?
I am, yes. Not you, though. You're working your way.
Isn't that what you're doing, one way or another?
Meaning?
A magazine article, just in case. Written right on the spot. Attempted theft of the Circle of Fire. Clever jewel
Why
thief.
do you say attempted?
I'm working my way, remember?
Sure, I remember. But it won't be attempted, Johnny. Somebody's going to get that necklace before the weekend is over. I'll bet on it.
Would you care to name any names?
Pick a name off the guest list. Any name.
Suppose I pick Sylvia Blake.
You're the detective.
You've dug up and written up every big-time jewel theft over the last 50 years. You're bugged on the subject. Obsessed with beautiful gems.
Fits my personality. I'm rather beautiful, too, in a brittle and glittering sort of way. Don't you think so, Johnny?
I think you work pretty hard at that tough act.
Maybe.
And I think you'd give your right arm to own that necklace.
Going after that would really be going for the big one. Going for broke. And somebody will do it, Johnny. Wait and see.
She left a few minutes later with the bottle under her arm and a chip on her shoulder. With the girl gone and the scotch gone, there seemed to be no point in me hanging around any longer. So I went looking for Mrs. Cronin to say goodbye. I didn't find her, but I did find her caller, Shorty Weber. He didn't hear me come into the room. He was too busy. He was hunched over Mrs. Cronin's writing desk going through her mail. You won't find it there, Shorty.
Who's that?
Hold it, Shorty. Don't try to reach for it.
I wasn't gonna. Honest, I wasn't.
Turn around. Put your hands up against the wall.
You got me all wrong. I wasn't
Okay,
gonna
relax.
do that. I was just
38, stub barrel, clip holster. Nice gun.
It belongs to a friend of mine.
Bad business, Shorty. An ex-con packing a gun.
Oh, I guess you're Johnny Dollar. She said you was here. And I know what you're thinking, Mr. Dollar, but you're wrong. Why, Dolly, Mrs. Cronin, she's an old friend of mine. I tried to get her to marry me once, over 30 years ago.
A lot can happen in 30 years. Does she know you've served time in prison?
Yeah. She thinks I was on tour, Europe and Australia. She never reads a paper or hears anything. Don't tell her, Mr. Dollar. Please don't.
You know, it's quite a coincidence, Shorty. It was Jules that time. A big affair in New Orleans. And you were hired as an entertainer. A diamond bracelet, wasn't it? And you were caught cold.
It's the only time in my life I ever done anything like that. And I went again. Especially not to her. Why, I'm planning to look out for her at this party. That's why I bought the gun.
And is that why you were going through her mail there?
Yeah. I wanted to see who was coming. I learned things while I was doing time. I know how the word gets around in a big deal like this. There's a lot of wrong guys in this world.
No argument, Shorty.
Yeah, well, you met her. You know how she is. She's a babe in the woods on something like this.
Should my ears be burning, or is it some other babe you mean?
Not for me, Dolly. You're the only babe I ever could see.
Oh, Shorty, you never give up. Oh, do you two know each other?
Not exactly, but we found we had a mutual friend. A certain state prison warden.
Oh, how nice. Shorty's always doing benefits at those places.
Dolly.
Yeah, that was it. He did a benefit there.
Oh, well, I'll bet you went over big.
Well, you know.
You're too modest, Shorty. Why, they loved him, Mrs. Cronin. Hated to let him leave.
Yeah. Well, speaking of leaving, I got a shove now. Don't take any wooden nickels.
It was crazy and corny and sad. The whole idea. I guess the sadness of it hit me when I was saying goodbye to Mrs. Cronin at the door. The gaiety slipped for a moment, and suddenly she was old and tired. And at the same time, she was a scared little girl. And then she said something strange, and the shivers ran up my back.
Do you believe in premonitions, Johnny?
Well, I have a hunch now and then.
Well, whatever it is, it's the reason I'm doing this. Having this party. One last fling, you might say, before it's too late.
Oh, come now. You're still a young woman, Mrs. Cronin.
No. I'm old, Johnny. I've been old for years. Since Barnaby died. We loved each other so, but that's not what I mean. I've had this premonition lately.
What sort of a premonition?
That something awful, something terrible is going to happen to me.
Johnny Dollar.
Mr. Dollar, this is Jason Prell.
Jason
I
Prell.
manage Mrs. Cronin's trust fund.
Oh, sure.
We haven't met, of course, and I know that I'm overstepping the ordinary bounds of propriety, but I simply have to talk to you immediately, if possible.
Well, can't it wait until train time? You're going with us up to a party in the Adirondacks, aren't you?
Yes, I am, but it'll be too late then to make very much difference.
Well, maybe you could tell me the general idea of what you
I
want.
understand Mrs. Cronin has authorized you to obtain the Circle of Fire from the bank and to keep it in your possession until she wears it at the party.
Yeah, that's right.
Don't do it. Leave the necklace where it is.
Why?
It's a long story, Mr. Dollar, and it goes a long way back. The whole thing is a lot more complicated than you realize.
Well, I'm beginning to realize it. Just exactly what is it you're worried about?
I'm worried about Mrs. Cronin's sanity.
From Special Investigator Johnny Dollar, New York City, to the Home Office Surety Mutual and Trust Company, Hartford, Connecticut. Assignment, the Cronin matter. Expense account continued. Item 4, $1.80. Taxi to the offices of the Daily Times Courier for a look at the morgue files on Mrs. Cronin. The clipping started with the year 1916 when a bright-eyed, wide-eyed kid named Dolly McLean danced her way out of the chorus lines of a two-bit musical and straight into the limelight of Broadway. One hit show after another, hits just because she was in them. And parties, balls, social affairs. The Dancing Darling. A critic tagged her with a name in her first write-up, and the name stuck. So she danced away the mad, crazy years that followed World War I. And like everybody else, she lived it up. There were rumors of engagements, love affairs, the Baron this, Count that, one after another. Shorty Weber was mentioned a few times. And Jason Prell was in from the beginning, as a promoter, though, a business manager, not as a lover. Her friends were mentioned, hundreds of them. Then Barnaby Cronin came into the file, boy wonder of the business world, the golden prince. Engagement, marriage, and Barnaby's fabulous gift to his new bride, a $500,000 necklace of diamonds and emeralds, the Circle of Fire. Then Barnaby's sudden death, Mrs. Cronin's seclusion. End of file. Expense account item 5, $24.30, transportation, hotel, and incidentals. And a taxi to the railway station to find the special coach Mrs. Cronin had chartered to haul her guests to the Adirondacks and to her roaring 20s weekend party. I purposely got there early, but one of the guests was even earlier.
Mr. Dollar? Wait. You are Mr. Dollar, aren't you?
That's right, but I don't think...
Jason Prell.
Oh.
I thought you might come down early to meet the bank messengers. Thank heaven you did.
Well, I'm afraid I don't...
Dollar, I've known Dolly McLean and Mrs. Cronin for over 35 years. All that time, I've managed her business affairs, arranged her personal contacts, been like a father to her.
Yeah, I've read the newspaper clippings.
Newspaper stories can be misleading sometimes. They build things up. Sensationalism. It's true, of course, that Dolly and I had some quarrels. Who doesn't? In spite of everything, I was still her best friend.
Go on.
I know Dolly, know her better than anybody else in the world. I know how she's gone downhill since Barnaby died, especially in the last year or so. And I know this whole idea is the worst possible thing she could do.
Have you tried talking to her along that line?
She won't listen. She's dead set on it. I'm hoping you can help.
How?
Point out to her how dangerous it is to go off into that isolated place with a piece of jewelry as valuable as a Circle of Fire. It's worth a fortune. Somebody's bound to try to steal it.
I still don't get what you're driving at, Mr. Prell.
But I just told you. It's the risk that's involved.
To whom?
Why, Mrs. Cronin, of course.
She knows about the risk. She's willing to take it.
She doesn't know what she's doing.
Hey, you said something on the phone about her sanity. Are you trying to imply that she's...
No. Not yet. But she's not well. She's burned herself up back in those early years, and she hasn't much left. The only thing that keeps her going has a crazy kind of belief.
Belief?
Dolly believes in people.
So do I, Mr. Prell.
Well, yes, of course. But Dolly's whole thinking hinges on it. All the people she knew back in the heyday, the people she calls her friends, in her book, they can do no wrong. She lived in a dream world, still does, like a fairy princess. But it never really existed. Things weren't like that back in those days, Mr. Dollar.
So I've heard.
Most of the people she thought of as friends were only trying to use her. Barnaby and I would block them off, take care of things when things had to be done, and let her go on living happily in her never land.
And now, that's the only land she has to live in. Is that what you mean?
Exactly. Why, some of those friends would cut their mother's throat for 1/10 of the value of the Circle of Fire. Those are the guests she'll have at their party.
Well, I've already been told once that somebody will steal that necklace before the weekend is over. Do you want to add your prediction?
I think somebody will try. And that's all that's needed to start that dream world of hers falling apart and to make her face things the way they are.
May I ask you a question, Mr. Prell?
Oh, yes, of course.
This trust fund you're managing that her husband left for her, just how big is the setup?
Barnaby Cronin was a wealthy man, Mr. Dollar, but he had his ups and downs like every business investor. The capital is adequate for her support, but not much more.
Is the necklace a part of the trust capital?
It's her own personal property. Otherwise, I could have prevented it from being taken from the bank.
You have complete control of the trust, then?
Yes. Barnaby knew that she had no understanding of business matters.
I see.
She's old, Mr. Dollar. Older than her years. Tired. All that keeps her alive is her belief in the past.
Yeah, her dream world, where everybody loves her and protects her. Where she's still a dancing darling.
And if that dream world is destroyed, she'll be destroyed along with it. Now phone the bank, Mr. Dollar. Ask them not to bring that necklace here.
I'm afraid they think I was crazy.
Why?
Because I've got it with me, Mr. Prell. I picked it up myself 2 hours ago.
Then heaven help us all.
The convention coach Mrs. Cronin had chartered for the run to the Adirondacks was arranged with a long aisle of individual staterooms and a main lounge area at one end. It could accommodate 50 people, but when the train pulled out, there were only 6 of us in the coach. 6. Out of the hundreds of friends she'd had in the old days when she was in the big time and on top. And even out of the 6, 3 of us were new acquaintances, people who hadn't known her back when. I was there, of course, because I'd been hired to be there to protect her fabulous necklace. And Sylvia Blake, still playing it tough and cynical, was probably hoping for a magazine article, or hoping for something. But the third newcomer, there was the question mark.
I think this whole thing is just too exciting for words. Don't you think it's too exciting for words?
Well,
I know who you are, of course. You're Mr. Johnny Dollar, and you're supposed to protect those fabulous jewels. And I'm Laura Dean, and I think we ought to call each other Laura and Johnny, because after all, it's a party, isn't it?
Up till now, I was having doubts. You're, obviously not one of Mrs. Cronin's friends from the old days.
Oh, no, I just met her back there at the station.
You what?
Well, I talked to her on the phone, of course. She sent an invitation to my aunt, who was a very dear friend of hers, only they hadn't seen each other for years, and she didn't know my aunt had passed on over a year ago. So I phoned her and told Mrs. Cronin, I mean, and she said for me to come to the party, she'd like to meet me, and I wouldn't have missed it for anything.
Yeah, well,
Johnny, do you think they'll really have champagne in bathtubs like they used to back in her time?
If they do, it'll get awful wet out. There are only 6 of us to drink it.
Oh, gosh, I don't see how you can call 6 people a party.
Well, the thing is, we'll all be in there trying hard.
Now you're joking me. I'll bet you're fun at a party.
Oh, wait till you see the act I do with the lampshade. Who did you say your aunt was?
I don't think I said who. When do they start serving the champagne, Johnny?
When they see the whites of your eyes.
That's cute. I like that.
Thanks. Now, about your aunt.
Poor old soul. She'd have loved this, too. You ought to hear about some of the parties she and Mrs. Cronin used to go to.
Yeah, I imagine.
They used to go every place together back in those days. The newspapers called them the Siamese Twins.
The
Siamese Twins. That was just an expression.
Fritzie Morell. Is that what you're saying? That you're Fritzie Morell's niece?
Sure. Did you know her, Johnny?
No, I never met her.
Oh, you'd have liked her. She was a lot of fun. Loved a party. Gosh, I thought there'd be more people than this.
She kept babbling on, and I listened to her, tried to figure her out. The chatter was smokescreen. Underneath it, she was cool, sharp, and shrewd. I didn't know what she was up to, nor why she was here. But I did know one thing. Fritzie Morell had died about a year ago, true enough. But she'd left no surviving family and no niece. Laura Dean was a liar. I hadn't seen Mrs. Cronin since we pulled out of the station. She'd greeted us, then gone right to her stateroom and stayed there. And when I saw Jason Prell come hurrying from that direction, I could read the look on his face even before he reached me.
Mr. Dollar, please.
Mrs. Cronin?
Yes, go to her at once.
What is it? What's wrong?
She was suddenly taken ill, very ill. Hurry.
Mrs. Cronin.
Come in. Oh, I'm all right now.
Oh.
It was just nerves. I've had it before. My doctor in New York gave me some tablets to take whenever...
Are these the tablets? This bottle here?
Well, yes. You know what they are, Johnny?
Yeah, I know.
All right. So he does say it's my heart. But he's wrong. It's just nerves.
Yeah, sure.
That's not why I sent for you, Johnny. You have the necklace.
Yeah. Want to see it?
No. I'll wait until it's time to wear it. Johnny, I've written something here. I'm going to sign it, and I want you to sign as a witness.
Well, all right. Unless you'd rather have Jason Prell.
Jason would argue about it. There. Now you sign.
There you are.
Keep it for me.
Do you mind if I know what I've signed?
Of course not. Read it if you like.
In the event of my death, I, Dolly Cronin, being of sound mind, bequeath the necklace known as the Circle of Fire to Sylvia Blake.
Sylvia loves jewels. She'll appreciate it.
Yeah, I imagine she will.
And she's not to know about this, you understand, because, of course, it'll be years before she gets it.
Oh, sure it will. Now, you'd better try to get some sleep.
I'm going to. And thanks, Johnny.
It was nothing.
You know something? I was heartbroken when they didn't show up at the station. all my old friends. But I've been lying here thinking, and I've finally figured it out.
Oh?
They all went on ahead. They'll be waiting at the house. They're trying to surprise me. Don't you think so, Johnny?
I said yes, I thought so. But I was lying, because I didn't think so. But she was still a dancing darling, and she had that way about her. You wanted to protect her. I didn't go back to the lounge. I walked down the corridor to my stateroom. It was night by then, and the corridor was only dimly lit. My stateroom was dark. When I opened the door, I caught a bare flash of movement. Too late. Oh! When I came to minutes later, I was lying on my stateroom floor, blood seeping from a cut in my head. I felt in my inside pocket for the bulky leather case that had held the necklace. It was gone.
There'll be another intriguing episode in our story of the Cronin matter tomorrow.
Tomorrow, an old love and an old hate. And violence breaks out at midnight. Join us, won't you? Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, starring Bob Bailey, is transcribed in Hollywood. Written by Les Crutchfield, it is produced and directed by Jack Johnstone. Be sure to join us tomorrow night, same time and station, for the next exciting episode of Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Roy Rowan speaking.
Welcome back. Well, an interesting twist with it actually not being stolen from the actress's neck, but from Johnny. I guess that would allow somebody hesitant about violence against her just to still get the necklace. I always imagined Johnny Dollar as somebody who could handle it. This is somewhat of a unique sort of type of character here. The aging starlet. I don't think you quite see it as much, and particularly not in the light of this very sympathetic characterization. It may have been if there was something that they were more aware of. The screen in Hollywood is the Screen Guild Theater. Those radio programs will play from time to time, which adapted movies, actually was set up to help pay for a rest home for retired actors and actresses who often would have found themselves destitute without the home support. Last I heard, I believe that home had actually been shut down. I'm not certain whether it was an improvement of ratings or less concern from Hollywood itself. But we'll find out tomorrow what happened to the jewels. Be sure and listen on Wednesday for part 3. Listener comments and feedback received a donation from Genevieve of $1. Lowest donation, but she had a reason for it. She said, love the podcast, even love the awful inflatable animal commercials. Donated $1 just for that. If you pretend to send me the talking Santa, I'll pretend to get them. I can smell the plastic over the radio. You do a good job, and our whole family listens. We'll donate more as we are able, but I had to send $1 just for the inflatable characters. I will pretend to send them. I don't know whether with some of these congressional debates you'll have to pretend to pay sales tax on the imaginary animals, but thank you. Great response to the giant animal commercials. I thank you, and PayPal thanks you. All right, listener comments and feedback, and we have a new iTunes review from the Shemp, who just simply says, regarding our app, it's the best old-time radio app I found. Well, thanks so much, Shemp. That will do it for today. Join us back here tomorrow for a new series, Mr. Moto, with Mr. James Monk as our star. In the meantime, send your comments to box13 at greatdetectives.net. Follow us on Twitter, Radio Detectives, and become one of our friends on Facebook, facebook.com/Radio Detectives. From Boise, Idaho, this is your host, Adam Graham, signing off.